introduce everyone that may join us, so you get to kind of bring them up to speed if they get in here a little bit later from now. But again, I'm Reverend Rachel Taber-Hamilton, Shakon First Nation, and my Shakon name is Shakon. My Athabascan name is Convocation. It's an honor to be with you and talk a little bit about what is called Resolution DO8O. First of all, you should know that resolutions, once they're passed by General Convention, kind of get distributed to appropriate standing commissions or committees to kind of say, okay, here's how we're going to implement this, or these are our recommendations, and in consultation with others, etc. So this particular resolution, DO8O, was handed over to the Standing Commission on Structure, Governance, Constitution, and Canons. And the reason it was given to us is because it will involve changing existing canons right now, specifically related to Navajo Land Area Mission. So now I'm going to just kind of turn to Ryan Kusumoto, who has been the chair of the Committee on Dispatch, kind of working with resolutions in process, to give all of us a little bit of history on what is the current canons related to Navajo land and what this resolution is calling for and presented to General Convention and passed by General Convention. So I'm going to let him tell the story and the title of DO8O, who is also on the Standing Commission for Constitution, Structure, Governance, Constitution,
Jonathan, what's the title of DO8O?
I know, it's like a long one, it's long.
So thank you everyone for allowing me to be here and inviting me to this conversation. I'm Ryan Kusumoto, and I reside in Hawaii, and I live on the island of Bluff. And I have been to General Convention. This is probably my seventh time. And I'm fortunate enough to work with folks like Rachel and other folks who are part of their deputation. More towns,
Excuse me, you can't hear me.
I'll use the microphone, sorry.
I wasn't getting that working too well.
Testing.
Yeah, you got it.
I'm so sorry. I just really quickly, again, I'm Ryan Kusumoto. I am from Hawaii. I've been part of the Episcopal Church of the General Convention for a number of years now. It used to be my seventh time. And I have had the privilege of working with folks like Rachel, as well as members of your deputation who go to General Convention on a regular basis. So thank you for allowing me to say a few words about this resolution. And Rachel and I talked earlier today and talked about maybe perhaps we take a little bit of a step back and just sort of ground ourselves from a common starting place. And so bear with me and just ask for some grace as I kind of dial back a little bit on General Convention and the resolutions and the canons in them itself. And I'll go a little quickly. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. But as Rachel said, that we have canons, right? Those are kind of like our laws for the Episcopal Church. And they are established and that, so, you know, for example, like what shows up in our churches on Sundays typically has come down from General Convention. We call General Convention sort of the ultimate decision maker of our church. In a similar way that this convocation is that for Navajo area land, some of the decisions made here roll into the churches below. So the decisions made at General Convention goes down to the diocese and into the parishes as well. At General Convention, we hold elections. We hold, and for example, you heard today, Cornelia, for example, is on Executive Council. We elected Rachel to be our Vice President of the House. We established leadership for that. We also passed what we call resolutions. Those resolutions can be for a number of different things. Resolutions can be how the Episcopal Church shows up in the world. Like we might want to take a stand. You might have heard news, or you might hear on Episcopal news like how we stand, or the Episcopal Church stands against gun violence, for example. Usually that's what happens at General Convention, that the Episcopal Church takes a stand against it. Also at General Conventions, we pass resolutions to change the canons, to sort of change the rules that are in place. And the way that happens is, how do we go about changing those canons? There's typically 4 ways that you can push forward a resolution. One is there are committees in the Episcopal Church that can do that. 2, the bishops can push forward a resolution. 3 is there could be convocations or dioceses that can push through resolutions. And then 4, it could be a deputy. As a deputy, she can put forward a resolution and put it forward to General Convention. Now, once the resolution gets made, put forward, General Convention has to vote on it, right? It has to maybe pass it. And the way it happens is there's 2 houses of General Convention, the House of Deputies and the House of Bishops. Bishop Weisner is the only one here, I believe, that is in the House of Bishops. And the deputation that you elected today are in the House of Deputies. So these 2 houses sit at General Convention, and they have to deal with all the resolutions that get lifted up by those 4 bodies that I talked about. And so what has to happen is one house has to vote on it, and then pass it over to the other house. And then the other house has to vote on it. And both houses have to pass it in that same vote. And once both houses pass it, it's passed. What we're here today to talk about is one of those, first of all, Rachel talked about a law or canon that impacts this area, this Navajo area. And the canon that we want to talk about today is this canon that states that if you are what's called an area mission, which is what the Navajo land falls into, is that the House of Bishops selects who's the bishop for this place. So it's different from a diocese. A diocese can select their own bishop. The diocese can select their own bishop. For a convocation or area mission, the area mission, the bishop is selected by the House of Bishops and also by the presiding bishop. So that's how it works. So that's the difference. What happened in this General Convention, this past General Convention back in 2022, is this resolution called D080. And D080 was, and the way you can tell who put it forward, we already talked about those 4 categories of resolutions. One could be pushed forward by a committee, the other one would be by bishops, the other one by dioceses, and the last one by deputies. The D stands for deputies. So a deputy pushed forward this, or deputies pushed forward this resolution to General Convention. So D080 went forward, and it passed. What D080 is trying to do is it asked the Standing Commission, so the commission that Rachel and I are on, to take a look at that particular canon that says the House of Bishops select the bishop for an area bishop. It's asking, what it asked was a little bit deeper for Navajo land in particular to be able to discern how to call upon a bishop for this place. So Rachel and I are here to have an opportunity to listen to all of you, to engage in that conversation about how Navajo land might want to do that. Do you want to add anything to that sort of general and broad overview?
That was good, yeah, not really. Yeah, this is a really unique opportunity for Navajo land because essentially it opens up a conversation between what might be called, the institutional church that has the obligation to be mindful to the canons and how we do business, and the conversation between institution and Navajo land. And it feels to me like a novel conversation in Indigenous country overall, where you all have the opportunity, because of what's being opened up here in dialogue by this resolution, to imagine with the institution how you would want to envision your future, including not only how you might go about selecting
bishop for yourselves in a way that would be culturally appropriate to your processes. And believe me, the Standing Commission is very much wanting you guys to provide leadership to us on what that might look like as a bishop selection process appropriate to you. And it also opens up another series of conversations potentially around other concerns we have, whether that's around ongoing funding, whether that's around how would the institution companion a new bishop through their process, to other listening sessions that we hope to have. We've been in dialogue with Canon Eaton and the bishop around doing listening sessions in September and coming out with members of the subcommittee that I'm chairing that is addressing DO8O and coming out to each of the regions in September to do further listening and answer questions.
So I just wanted to pause there and see if there are just like any questions on the, sort of that overall process. I wouldn't really, just scratch the surface of the right.
Related to this is an unfortunate situation.
Thank you. Well, related to this is an unfortunate situation we find ourselves in now, where there are currently no indigenous diocesan bishops in the Episcopal Church. We have retired bishops and we have assisting bishops, a few of those. But currently there are no functioning diocesan bishops, or ordinaries, as they're sometimes called. Which means that our voice is really not being heard in the House of Bishops. And when our voice is not heard in the House of Bishops, we are alienated from probably the most significant circle of power in the church. Now, we did have diocesan bishops who were indigenous we continually had one from the early 1980s with Bishop William Wantland, who was Seminole from Oklahoma. He was in the Diocese of Eau Claire for a number of years. And then we had others, Creighton Robertson in South Dakota, and Bishop Plummer, and Bishop Michael Smith in North Dakota. I think Michael Smith was the last one. When he resigned in 2019, he was our last diocesan bishop that we had. So we need diocesan bishops who are indigenous, who come from indigenous communities, who understand the indigenous worldview and the indigenous view of the church, who have a good grasp of history and the tragedies of the doctrine of discovery and its impact on indigenous people to the present day. The doctrine of discovery still has an impact on us today. The House of Bishops needs to have that presence. The reason that it's important for us to look at this resolution is because we can't really have that honestly and authentically without indigenous input, without indigenous people being part of the process. Because right now I know that there are a few indigenous people whom I know who have put their names in for Episcopals, diocesan Episcopals throughout the church, and haven't gotten selected. And I suspect, this is my opinion, but I suspect the reason that they have not gotten selected is because the diocese and search committees really don't understand what indigenous leadership is. They don't understand the qualities of it. They don't know how to recognize it. So we have indigenous candidates for bishops who are being subjected to basically the standard of the general population. And we know that our culture is not one of the general population. So if it's a diocese that particularly is serving indigenous people, while a non-indigenous person can be capable of doing it well, there are a number of examples of that we see. We need an indigenous voice, desperately in the House of Bishops. So that's one thing.
Thank you, Brad. And again, I would say oftentimes what happens in indigenous country is the feeling that, the church institution is imposing upon us how we should be. And we hear acts of convention as often being the vehicle for that. However, DO8O is exactly the opposite. It's the opportunity for the Diné to say to the institution, this is what we want. And everyone on the Standing Commission for Structure, Governance, Constitution, and Canons is deeply committed, including all the lawyers that are sitting there, deeply committed to doing these listening sessions, doing some answering questions, or providing education enough so that there's mutual understanding around what the options could be, including, revisioning the bishop selection process as you may want it in a way that asks for changes from the Office of Pastoral Care of TEC, of the Episcopal Church, because that office is the one that usually oversees bishop elections and selections. And you all have the opportunity to basically tell that office, we're going to be doing something different. And you're in the driver's seat. So it would be really important for these listening sessions and mutual conversations to be able to, like I say, do a little education so you know what that is, what you have as opportunity in front of you. And if you said culturally appropriate for you would be, y'all need to come to a consensus around a certain candidate. Because DO8O makes a real point of saying, this needs to be a Navajo person. Now, you also could say, after listening sessions and discussion and more learning, you might say, you know what, maybe what we need is something a little broader, but you might even want to make it more specific. So just know that you have in front of you, I think, the most unique opportunity I've ever seen in indigenous country, in the Episcopal Church, was you are being given a canvas around which there are certain borders. You're not going to be able to go off border, but you will also be given a palette, and you can do a whole lot of things on that canvas. So is there any questions about what your opportunity is or concerns you have right off the bat when you hear that you're going to be put in the driver's seat of creating your own bishop selection process? Does that feel good, or are you going, what does that mean? Yeah.
If DO8O passes the law, does it become law that became a law and then it is in effect?
It's already in effect. It was already passed by General Convention of 2022. So it's a thing. And our Standing Commission is sitting here with this really unique thing. And we're saying, like I'm going to ask Ryan to read some of this. Is that good, Ryan?
Sorry, so let me clarify D080. So Rachel is right that D080 did pass. So it's done. Yeah. But this is what it says. It doesn't yet say Navajo land can select its own bishop. That's not what it says. But it says, the title of it is Building Community to Discern and Call Episcopal Leadership in the Episcopal Church on Navajo land. What this calls for is, it asks, I'll read the third result. It says that the 80th General Convention, the one in 2022, direct the Standing Commission on Structure, Governance, Constitution, and Canons to study and evaluate means by which the Episcopal Church in Navajo land and area mission could participate in the selection, election, or consent to a bishop for the Episcopal Church in Navajo land, within the provisions of the Constitution and Canons of the Episcopal Church, including but not limited to a process by which the House of Bishops shall assign a bishop who is discerned and called by the Episcopal Church on Navajo land, subject to the rules and procedure it adopts. So there's a lot of wording there, but basically it's what Rachel said. This is our time now to figure out what it is that Navajo land wants, how to move forward in the future about selecting a bishop.
Yeah, and so they could continue to do kind of the process in place of bishop selecting, but they could have a lot more input. Or they could say, we want to change this even further.
So I'm not even sure how much people know about this yet. So let me introduce myself. I'm the Reverend Ann Hallisey, and I happen to be married to Bishop Eisner. And one of the things I do is consult with dioceses that are electing a new bishop, and I've been doing that for about 15 years. And I work for the Office of Pastoral Development. And Bishop Todd Owsley, who was here with us, and Bishop Bailey last fall to speak with the Standing Committee of the Clergy, just beginning this process. And because of DO8O, and also because of our work with the Navajo clergy over the last 4 years, it's a core value of ours that however the next bishop is chosen needs to be done with deep and abiding respect for and in the Navajo way. So this is actually my idea of a really good time, because it means that all the usual way of electing a bishop kind of can just be set aside. And I can advise Navajo land about the things that have to be done. Like there are certain things that have to happen, like you have to get consent from a majority of bishops and consent from a majority of the standing committees. And there are things that have to be filed on time. But apart from those kind of minimal requirements, we can figure it out however seems to fit for ECN. And I am very excited about that work. And I've come on board now because of DO8O and helping the Standing Commission and the Office of Pastoral Development and ECN to do the work in advance of General Convention, to figure out, bring to General Convention some ideas about what we're thinking and how we want to go about this, and how those things are anchored in Navajo values. So that's my role, and I'm here. I just screeched in by God's grace and Holy Spirit for all kinds of reasons, and I'm here the rest of the time, and I will be back in early September when members of the Standing Commission come to do their listening sessions in the regions, and I will be going along with them for that.
You mentioned how, Kathleen, you mentioned how, well, actually Rachel responded to you about how this could be perhaps a model for other indigenous sort of populations across our church, right? Navajo land is kind of unique in terms of its area mission status, but there are other places. I live in Hawaii, and there are struggles that the Native Hawaiian population also is challenged with. The other ones in particular that we work with as well, they're not area missions, but similar in some ways. We've got the Episcopal Church in Micronesia, in Guam, in Samoa, and some of those areas too struggle with some of the nuances. And when I've had conversations with them, one of the things that always comes up is within change. So there's this need for the desire to have more of a voice and control of their future that's based in their culture. But one thing that always comes up too is this sense of fear about what the change could also bring. And one of the questions that always come up in the conversations I have is about the fear of the support from the wider church. Like if we make any of these changes, does anything else sort of change, right? And I think that's the piece too that we want to make sure that as we're talking about this, we're not saying that if you change and go for something new, you have to give up something. And perhaps maybe we should be asking for more in this process while we're moving forward. It's sort of one to firm it up. Again, easier said than done, but when we talk about those things, I think sometimes it was helpful to talk about what our fears were and all that too, and to make sure that, like, especially for us, like at the commission, we're mindful of that. And what I'm sharing this with you is because even at the commission level, where we've been talking about, that this doesn't mean that if Navajo land were to change their process for which they select a bishop, it doesn't change like other things with regards to their relationship with the church. Like, for example, today we talked about how the church grants 2/3 of Navajo land's budget from the national churches or the Episcopal churches. We're not talking about anything like that. We're not talking about changing that. Maybe in a little ways. Maybe we talk about it more in ways of the church should solidify that contribution to Navajo land from the sense of reparations. Like it's more, from that perspective. But I just want to sort of share that with all of you too, that I understand that with any type of change comes a little bit of fear, and that's also something that we want to make sure that we can talk about in this process as well. And maybe there are not a lot of questions right now, but the hope is that some of the questions continue to spark your conversations with Anne and at our listening sessions down the road that we can start talking about.
Yeah, and whatever concerns that you have about it, just you can direct those to us at any time. We're going to be, I'm not too sure when we're meeting again as a commission, but it'll be pretty soon. But at any time you can reach out and say, hey, what about this, hey, what about that? And if we can't answer those immediately, we will, get the information that you need. I've been really impressed with the level and quality of conversation on the commission. And again, there's a lot of lawyers here. And if you've worked closely, that you can say, they can tighten up, right? They're button down stuff, tighten up stuff. And this is the most reflective and open that I've heard a group of attorneys be of one mind. There was one, as Brian mentioned, who, when we were talking about, hey, is there a way to protect the funds, kind of memorialize those as reparations going forward? And there was one of these folks who kind of went, well, why would we do that? And then I said, well, we're also committed to reparations. And it doesn't only apply to African American communities. It applies to all of our communities of color. And oh, by the way, indigenous people who are here, because every Episcopal church is on indigenous lands in every country and continent that experienced colonialism. So those kinds of memorialized funds are appropriately dedicated as reparation. And this particular attorney went, oh. So, and that's all it took, to kind of just do mindfulness of what the church says, what the institution says it's committed to, and it says it's committed to Navajo land. And so we are there as a commission and with your consultant and bishop to assure that the process is your process as you have been identifying it and continue to identify it. It really is asking Navajo land, and not only the deputies, and not only standing committee, and not only ECM, it's asking all of Navajo land to grasp this as participatory responsibility. It's your process. And we, as Indigenous people, many times my community will get in a place of feeling much more comfortable kind of saying to our institution, you're failing us. And then the moment that they're saying, well, then what do you want? Let's do what you want. We kind of go, what? and kind of taking a handle on that can feel initially pretty challenging. And it's just getting the information, it's getting onboarded, it's hearing the history so that everyone knows that history. And it's hearing how did this evolve in the first place. And oh golly, it's not as scary as it maybe we're concerned it would be. Even if you change your identity, let's say you got to a place of saying, you know what, we could become a kind of diocese. We could do that. We could ask for that. But what would that mean? And guess what? It only needs a name change. It can then fill in the blanks with canon about how your diocese would have unique processes. So but again, that's all part of a big conversation you all get to have because it's yours. It's yours.
I don't have anything else to say for first of all, I really appreciate these stories. I think that's where that you're writing stuff down to take back to our commission. Those stories tell quite a bit in terms of a lot of the path forward. But the other piece is, and I say this from a very privileged standpoint, is, you know, if you can help us think about what else we can do to learn more about how to move forward. So when we talk about listening sessions, we had a call out here to make more information available to all people who know that. But if there's anything else unique that we can be doing to know what we don't know, we really appreciate to hear your thoughts about that as well.
Absolutely, and it's been really helpful to even hear the history yesterday a bit of St. Christopher's, and I think that applies to all the regions. So I'm very much looking forward to the listening sessions and hearing more history of each of the regions in September. And thank you for this time and your presence.
Thank you.
Thank